Every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, my son called me. Not a text, not a quick check-in, an actual phone call, the old-fashioned kind, the kind he'd kept up since the week he left for college 14 years ago. He never missed it, not through his wedding week, not through the birth of his second boy, not through the year he broke his leg skiing and called me from a hospital bed slurring on painkillers just to keep the streak alive. So when 8 o'clock came and went with no call, I told myself he was probably stuck in traffic. When 9 o'clock came and went, I told myself the same thing, quieter. By 10, I wasn't telling myself anything at all. I was just sitting in my chair with the phone in my hand, staring at a screen that wouldn't light up. My name is Walter Hensley. I'm 63 years old, a retired electrician, 38 years with the same union local out of Dayton, Ohio. Before my knees gave out and my wife Doris finally talked me into hanging up my tool belt for good. I spent nearly 4 decades reading houses the way other men read books, tracing wires behind drywall, finding the short before it started a fire, knowing which flicker in a light fixture meant a loose connection and which one meant something was about to go seriously wrong. You learn things doing that kind of work. You learn that problems almost never announce themselves. They hum along quietly under the surface, until the day they don't. Our son Daniel is 34, married 9 years to a woman named Priya, father to 2 boys, Milo, who's 7, and Sam, who just turned 4. Daniel manages a regional office for an insurance company 40 minutes from us, out in a town called Fairhaven, and every Wednesday, rain or shine, sick or well, he'd call me while Priya put the boys down for bed. We talked about nothing important, mostly. The Reds' bullpen, a leak he was thinking about fixing himself before he thought better of it and called me instead. Milo's soccer games. It wasn't a deep conversation most weeks. It was just contact, the kind of contact fathers and grown sons don't always know how to keep up, and I was proud that we had. That Wednesday, in September, Doris had a chicken in the oven and the whole kitchen smelled like rosemary, and I was in my recliner, with the ball game muted, waiting for the phone to buzz the way it always did, right at 8. Doris kept walking past me to check the oven, resting her hand on my shoulder each time the way she's done for 39 years of marriage. "Daniel's going to tell you about Milo's tournament," she said from the kitchen. "They won their bracket, I guess." I said that was good. 8 o'clock came. Nothing. I told myself it was nothing. 8:15 I called him myself. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, his voice bright and easy. "You've reached Daniel. Leave a message." I didn't leave one. I set the phone down, and Doris brought 2 plates to the coffee table and sat next to me, handing me a fork, like everything was fine, like the world hadn't just tilted 2 degrees to the left. At 8:30 I tried again, straight to voicemail this time. No ring at all. Phone off, or dead, or somewhere it couldn't be heard. At 8:45, I called Priya's cell instead. She picked up on the second ring, and something in her voice was wrong before she said a single word, too bright, too quick, like a woman reciting lines she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "Walter, hi," she said. "Everything okay up there?" I told her we were supposed to talk to Daniel at 8 and he wasn't answering. There was a pause, just a half-second too long. "Oh, he's out," she said. "He went to help a buddy from work move some furniture. I think his phone died." "He does that?" I asked. "Which buddy?" "Someone from the office. I don't remember his last name," she said. "He'll call you when he's back, probably late." I asked to talk to the boys. "They're already down," she said. "Long day. I should go, Walter. I've got dishes." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there holding a phone that had gone dark in my hand, and Doris was watching me with that look she gets when she already suspects something's wrong but hasn't let herself say it out loud yet. "What'd she say?" my wife asked. I told her. Doris set her fork down slow and deliberate. "Daniel doesn't have a buddy she wouldn't know the name of," she said. "He tells us everything, Walter. He'd have mentioned moving furniture on a Wednesday." I told her I knew. I looked at the phone, then at the muted television, then at the front door, the way a man looks at a door when part of him is already halfway through it. In 38 years running wire through other people's walls, I learned one hard rule above all the others. A circuit doesn't just go dead for no reason. Something trips it. Something shorts out somewhere upstream. And if you're smart, you don't wait around hoping it fixes itself. You trace it back to the source before the whole house goes dark. I'll try again in an hour, I told Doris. If nothing, I'll figure out what's next in the morning. She nodded, but her knuckles had gone white around her coffee mug, and neither one of us finished our dinner. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there next to Doris, listening to her breathing even out sometime past midnight, her hand resting on my arm the way it does when she's worried but won't say it. Around 1:30, I eased out from under the covers, pulled on a flannel shirt, and padded down to the kitchen in my socks. I made real coffee, not the decaf my cardiologist keeps pushing on me, and sat at the table with my phone in front of me, willing it to light up. Nothing. I called Daniel one more time and let it ring through to voicemail, listening to the whole message just to hear his voice, then hung up before the beep. On the wall above our stove, there's a photograph Doris framed years back. Daniel, at 9 years old, standing in our garage in my old work gloves, way too big for his hands, grinning like he'd just discovered something enormous. He used to follow me around on Saturday jobs when he was a boy, not because I needed the help, but because he liked asking questions the whole drive there and back. Why does a breaker trip when you run the microwave and the toaster at once? Why do old houses hum sometimes at night? Because current's always looking for the easiest way through, I told him once. Same as water. Same as most things. He nodded like I'd handed him something valuable. He went into insurance instead of the trade, but he told me once he liked it because it was about protecting people from the things they couldn't see coming. I told him that was about as fine a reason as I'd ever heard for choosing a line of work. I let my mind go then, to the place I'd been holding it back from all evening. Priya's husband, my son, had married a good woman, but I'd never been easy about the fellow she introduced into our family 2 years back. Her older brother, Arav, who'd moved in with them the past spring after some trouble I never got the full story on. He called himself a financial consultant, which in my experience is a phrase men use when they don't want to say what they actually do for money. He was smooth in that particular way, always dressed a notch too sharp for the occasion, always the loudest laugh in the room. The kind of man who seemed to be performing even when nobody but family was watching. Daniel had never complained about him outright, but 3 months back, on a Wednesday call, I'd asked my son straight out if everything was all right at home. "I'm fine, Dad," he'd said, a little too fast. "Just a lot going on with work." I hadn't pushed. I've thought about that more than I can say since. And there'd been a Saturday last month when I'd driven out to help Daniel replace a garbage disposal, and Priya had come into the kitchen holding her wrist funny, favoring it, and when I'd asked what happened, she'd smiled and said she'd caught it in a cabinet door. I let it go, sitting in my kitchen at 2 in the morning with cold linoleum under my socks. That memory sat in my stomach like a stone. "Walter." Doris's voice came soft from the hallway. She stood in the doorway in her robe, hair loose, eyes heavy with interrupted sleep. "Come back to bed, honey." I told her I couldn't sleep. She sat across from me and put her hand over mine on the table. "You're thinking about Arav," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm thinking about Daniel," I said. "He's fine," she said, but her voice cracked just slightly on the word, and we both heard it. I turned her hand over in mine and held it properly. "If I call Daniel's office first thing and they tell me he took a day, a scheduled thing, anything official, I'll let this go," I said. "I'll sit here and drink my coffee and wait for him to call." Her fingers tightened around mine. "And if they say he didn't?" I looked up at that photograph on the wall. My boy at 9 years old in gloves 3 sizes too big. "Then I'm getting in the truck," I said. Doris didn't argue. She just held my hand tighter, and we sat together in that quiet kitchen until the sun came up. At 8 sharp, I called Meridian Insurance and asked for Daniel's floor manager, a woman named Carol who I'd met once at a company picnic. "Mr. Hensley." "Hi," she said, voice bright and practiced. Then a pause, keys clicking. "I'm showing Daniel's been out since Monday. No PTO request on file. No call-in that I can see. We've actually been trying to reach him ourselves. Is everything all right?" I told her I wasn't sure yet. I set the phone down. Doris was watching me, hands folded so tight her knuckles had gone bloodless. "Monday," she whispered. "Walter, that's 3 days. 3 days, and his own office didn't know where he was." I was already moving toward the bedroom, pulling my work boots out of the closet. I always think clearer with the right boots on. 40 years of habit, and Doris appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed tight. I'm coming with you, she said. No, I said gently but firm. I need you here, in case he calls this line. You're my backup. Her chin trembled, but she nodded. I kissed her forehead, grabbed my keys and the toolbox I still keep behind the seat of my truck out of pure habit, and backed out of the driveway. Before I hit the highway, I tried Priya one more time. She picked up on the fourth ring, voice tighter than it had been the night before. Priya, Daniel didn't take leave. His office has been trying to reach him since Monday. I need to know what's going on. A long pause. Walter, I really think you should just let this go. Let Daniel. Give me a name, I said, harder than I meant to. Give me a phone number. Something. Another pause, longer, and I could hear her breathing on the other end. Look, Marcus, I really think I went cold all over. My name is Walter, I said slow. Raymond Hensley, Walter Hensley. You've called me Marcus twice now. Who is Marcus? The line went dead. In 38 years of wiring houses, when a job looked fine on paper but something kept nagging at the back of my neck, I learned to trust that feeling every single time. People don't get somebody else's name wrong by accident. They mix it up when their mind's already somewhere else entirely, rehearsing a different conversation. I put the truck in gear and headed for Fairhaven. The drive felt like it took 4 times as long as it should have. I kept the radio off, just me and the white lines and the fields giving way to subdivisions as Dayton faded behind me. I turned onto Larkspur Court a little after 9:30. It's a quiet street. Ranch houses set back behind big maples starting to turn, the kind of neighborhood where people know each other's names and wave at the mail carrier. I'd always liked it for Daniel and his family. I slowed as I came up on the house, and something in my chest tightened before I could even say why. Every curtain was drawn. The porch light was still burning weak in the daylight, left on from the night before. And in the driveway, Daniel's gray Tacoma sat exactly where it always sat. I parked across the street and cut the engine, just looking. Priya had told me Daniel was out helping a friend move furniture. His truck hadn't gone anywhere. I climbed out and stood on the sidewalk a moment, reading the house the way I used to read a job site before I touched a single wire, noticing what didn't add up. 3 days of newspapers sat wet and curling on the front walk. The mums Priya planted every fall in the window box, the ones she tended religiously, had gone brown and wilted, drooping like something that had stopped waiting. I walked up and knocked hard, 3 times. Daniel, I called. It's Dad. Open up. Nothing moved. I knocked again. Harder. Milo, buddy. It's Grandpa Walt. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Inside. Nothing. No footsteps. No cartoons. No voices. I went around to the garage and cupped my hands against the small window. Priya's minivan sat in the near bay. The far bay was empty. I went back to the front door, and my fingers found the spare key on my ring. Daniel had pressed it into my hand 2 years back after a break-in 2 doors down. Just in case. Dad, he'd said, quiet enough Priya couldn't hear from the other room. I slid it into the deadbolt. It turned clean, and the door swung open. Stale air hit me first. A house shut up tight for days with the heat running. Underneath it, something sour. A trash can gone too long, unemptied. The living room looked almost normal at a glance, but I'd wired enough houses to know when a room had been straightened in a hurry. The throw pillows sat too perfectly squared. A single Hot Wheels car lay abandoned on the carpet, too far from the toy bin to have rolled there naturally. I moved into the kitchen. 2 days of dishes crusted in the sink. The counters had been wiped fast. I could smell the cleaner, but whoever did it missed the corner by the stove. I opened the fridge. Beer, leftover takeout, milk expired since Monday. No juice boxes. No snack bags with a kid's name written on them in a mother's handwriting. Nothing a 4-year-old would eat. I stood in the middle of that kitchen with something cold settling into my chest, and then I looked down. Under the sink, where I'd rewired the garbage disposal outlet myself 2 summers back, sat the small breaker panel Daniel had added when he finished the basement. I crouched and looked at it the way I'd looked at 10,000 panels over 38 years. Every switch was thrown to on every circuit live except one, down at the bottom, flipped hard to off. Basement lights. Somebody had killed the power to that room on purpose. I straightened up slow, and that's when I heard it, a sound rising faint through the floor beneath my boots. Not footsteps, not the furnace. Something with a rhythm to it, deliberate, starting and stopping like it wanted to be heard, and was afraid to be heard at the same time. At the far end of the kitchen, past the pantry, was a door I'd hung myself the year Daniel finished that basement plane. Painted the same white as the wall, easy to miss unless you knew it was there. It had a padlock on it now, not the simple slide bolt I remembered installing. A heavy-duty combination lock, brand new, bright steel with no rust on it at all. My stomach dropped clean through the floor. I pressed my palm flat against the door, cool under my hand. I leaned my ear against it, closed my eyes, and filtered out the refrigerator hum and the tick of the furnace. Breathing. Slow, shallow, but breathing. On the other side, my throat locked up so hard I couldn't get a word out for a second. I forced air into my lungs and knocked, gentle, 2 knuckles. "Priya," I said, barely a whisper. "It's Walter, Daniel's dad." Nothing. Then a sharp intake of breath from the other side, the sound of someone who'd been holding dead still just cracking open. And I thought of something then, something I hadn't thought of in 20 years when Daniel was small. We used to play hide-and-seek in that old house on Ridgeline Drive, and when I got close to finding him, he never gave himself away by moving. He knocked. 3 slow knocks on whatever was nearest him. Our signal. "I'm here, Dad. You're getting warm." I raised my fist and knocked on that basement door, 3 times. Slow. 5 seconds of silence stretched out so long I could feel my own heartbeat in my back teeth. Then, from the other side, 3 knocks back. Slow. Deliberate. I grabbed the padlock and pulled. Solid. My hands were shaking so bad I had to steady myself on the fridge, and the shaking made me furious because I needed my hands working right now. "Priya, I hear you," I said through the door frame. "I'm right here. I'm getting this door open. I am not leaving this house without you." From the other side, muffled and hoarse, and the most welcome sound I'd heard in 63 years, my daughter-in-law's voice. "Walter." Just that. It came out in pieces, like it had been saved up too long and gotten too heavy to carry whole. I ran for the truck. My toolbox sat where it always lived, and my hands found the bolt cutters by feel 18-inch channel locks I'd owned since the Reagan administration. Back inside, I set the jaws around the shackle, planted my feet the way I've stood on 1,000 job sites, and squeezed with everything a 63-year-old body had left to give. My shoulders screamed. The shackle groaned and snapped, and the lock hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. I wrenched the door open. Damp concrete and old insulation hit me first, and under it, the faint chemical smell of a camping toilet somebody had thought to give her that much, at least. I hit the light switch at the top of the stairs. A bare bulb flickered on. "Priya, I'm coming down," I called, my voice cracking down the middle. "Please hurry," floated up from the dark, rough as dry leaves on concrete. I went down those stairs faster than my knees had any business moving. In the far corner, sitting against the concrete wall with her knees pulled to her chest, was my son's wife. Her hair was matted at the back. Her face had that grayish, papery look that comes from days without real food or sunlight. Her wrists were ringed red and raw where something had been tied and later removed. Her eyes found me, and they were shattered and whole at once, like someone who'd been holding herself together by sheer will and had just had every knot come undone at the sight of a familiar face. I crossed that basement in 4 steps and dropped to my knees, and she came apart in my arms, not quietly, sobbing out loud, her whole body shaking against my chest. "I've got you," I kept saying. "You're safe. He's not here. You're safe." She choked out that she'd heard me come in upstairs, heard the fridge open, and hadn't known if it was me or if it was him coming back. "It's me," I told her. "Just me." When she'd cried herself down to shaking, I pulled back and looked at her properly cracked lips, a healing scrape along one cheekbone, eyes sunken and bruised, dark with exhaustion. "How long has he had you down here?" I asked. Her voice came out steadier than I expected. "Since Monday night," she said. "Arav came home with someone, a woman. They were arguing upstairs, and then he came down here and told me I needed to sign something about the house. I said no. He said it'd only be a day or 2 until I changed my mind." "What papers?" I asked. "Transfer papers," she said, jaw working. "He wanted the house put in a company name. I told him I'd call a lawyer. That's when he locked the door and left me down here." I brushed her hair back the way I imagined Daniel doing for her 100 times, and my eyes were burning, but I wasn't going to let myself fall apart yet, not with 10 more minutes of work still ahead of me. Can you walk? She thought so. We made it 3 steps up before she grabbed my arm hard and stopped cold. Walter, where are the boys? Arav said he sent them to his mother's in Cincinnati. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know if they're okay. Her fingers dug into my forearm hard enough to bruise. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. In the terror and the relief of the last 10 minutes, I hadn't gone upstairs. I hadn't checked a single bedroom. I looked at her and said the only true thing I had. I'm going to find them right now. Stay here. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Priya called up after me Milo's room, second door on the left, the one with the dinosaur decal. I already knew. I'd helped hang that decal myself. I pushed the door open. Stuffed animals arranged with a 7-year-old's private logic. A half-built Lego set on the floor, one piece still in a small hand's grip position like it had been dropped mid-motion. No Milo. No Sam. The curtains were drawn, the room dim and still. I kept my voice low, the way I used to talk to Daniel when he had nightmares. Milo. Sam. It's Grandpa Walt. You can come out now, buddies. It's okay. Nothing moved. I thought about the milk expired since Monday. I thought about that one circuit switched off on purpose. I thought about Daniel at 6 years old jammed into the cabinet under our bathroom sink, knocking 3 times so I'd find him. I crossed to the bed, crouched, and lifted the bed skirt. Dark under there. For one terrible second I saw nothing, and then 2 small shapes shifted in the far corner, behind a tangle of stuffed animals and a rolled-up sleeping bag. 2 sets of eyes, wide and terrified, blinking back at me. Milo. Sam. It's Grandpa. My voice broke clean in half. A small, cracked sound came from the older one, trying hard not to cry and losing that fight in the same breath. Then they were moving, scrambling out, and Milo slammed into my chest so hard I rocked back on my heels, Sam right behind him, both of them shaking so violently I could feel it in my teeth. They weighed almost nothing. I've got you, I said into Milo's hair. Grandpa's got you both. You're safe. Milo pulled back just enough to look at me, tear-streaked. A smear of peanut butter dried on his chin. Then he shoved something into my hands, his mother's old tablet, the one she used for grocery lists, screen cracked in one corner, a dinosaur sticker peeling off the case. I recorded it, Grandpa, he said, voice raw. I didn't know what else to do. I put it under my pillow, and then I pushed it under the bed with us, and just let it record. I thought you'd want to know what happened. I looked down at the screen. A single audio file. 51 minutes, time-stamped from Monday evening. I couldn't say a word. I cupped that boy's face in both hands, dirt and tears and peanut butter and all. Do you know how smart you are? He let out a wet, exhausted laugh that sounded exactly like his father at that age. Mom always says I get that from you. I tucked the tablet under my arm, took Sam up against my other hip, and got Milo's hand in mine, and we went down those stairs together to where Priya was waiting. I dialed 911 from the staircase. I need an ambulance, I said, keeping my voice level while 2 small boys pressed against me. An adult female and 2 children, 7 and 4, confined without food or water for approximately 3 days. Conscious, breathing, no immediate life-threatening injuries that I can see, but they need care now. The dispatcher kept me on the line until the paramedics came through the door. I'd left open a young man and an older woman who moved with the calm of people who'd done this 100 times. Moderate dehydration, the woman said, cuff on Priya's arm. BP's low. The man checked Milo's pulse. This one's elevated. How long did you say? 3 days, I told him. Priya in the basement. The boys upstairs, hiding under the bed. He looked at Milo with something soft crossing his face before the professional mask came back down. They loaded all 3 into one ambulance without my even having to ask, and I rode up front while they worked in back, calling Doris the whole way. I found them, I said before she could get a word out. Walter, all of them? All of them. Alive. We're headed to Fairhaven General right now. The sound she made wasn't a word. It was 39 years of marriage, compressed into one exhale. At the hospital, a detective met me in the waiting room within the hour. A broad-shouldered man in his 40s named Ruiz, out of the county sheriff's office, who'd caught the call from ambulance dispatch. I told him everything. Start to finish, the breaker panel, the padlock, the knock signal, the basement, The tablet. You haven't listened to the recording yet, he said. I told him I'd been a little busy. My phone rang while we stood there. Arev's name on the screen. Ruiz raised a hand, pulled out his own phone, opened a recording app, and nodded. I answered it on speaker. What did you do? Arav said. All the smoothness burned off his voice. That's my house, Walter. You had no right. Your sister is currently getting IV fluids in the ER, I said, careful and flat. And your nephew spent 3 days hiding under a bed eating crackers and drinking from the bathroom faucet in the dark. Dead air. 3 full seconds. Then his voice came back flatter, calculated. I want to talk to my lawyer. He didn't ask if they were okay. He didn't ask which hospital. He asked for a lawyer, and Ruiz was already writing in his notebook with a look on his face that told me exactly where this was headed. Ruiz led me to a small consultation room and set the tablet on the table between us. You sure you want to hear this? She's my son's wife, I said. Play it. The recording opened with fabric shifting, a careful exhale, then Milo's whisper. I'm under the bed. I'm really scared. Mom said wait for Grandpa Walt, so that's what I'm doing. My throat closed so completely I couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. Minutes of careful, controlled breathing, then a door opening somewhere in the house. 2 sets of footsteps. A woman's voice, sharp and tense. Arav, this is insane. We cannot leave her down there. Arav's voice, smoother than I'd ever heard it. Nadia, calm down. This is temporary. Nadia let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. She's been down there since last night. Arav, I'm 4 months pregnant. I can't be part of this. You're already part of it, Arav said, cooling. That ship sailed when you helped me get the paperwork drafted. So let's stay focused. The house closes escrow the 15th. Once that's done, we're gone. New start. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted out of debt, Nadia said, voice cracking. I didn't want this. She has kids, Arav. They're right upstairs. They're fine, probably asleep. You don't know that. You haven't checked. A pause, then something in his voice went quieter, more deliberate. Priya will sign. She just needs a few more days to understand she doesn't have another option. Once she signs, we call it in. Say we came home and found her like this, too scared to say otherwise, clean. And if she doesn't sign, 4 seconds of silence on the recording. She'll sign, he said. 3 more days, then we report her missing. By the time anyone's asking real questions, we're in Arizona and the money's already moved. Ruiz stopped the recording. My hands were flat on the table, shaking steady, like current running through something not built to carry it. He knew the boys might be in the house, I said. Nadia told him, and he said they were fine. He didn't check. He walked out the front door. Yes, Ruiz said. He was going to move her in 3 more days. I looked up. I got there 2 days before that. Ruiz held my gaze. Mr. Hensley, what you found today, the padlock, Priya's condition, this recording, combined with his behavior on that call, that's enough for an arrest warrant on kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. I'm going to make some calls. Alone in that room, I thought about 2 days. 1 day earlier, and Arav would have moved her somewhere I'd never have found. 1 day later, and I'd have been too late to matter. My phone buzzed a text from Doris. A number she didn't recognize had messaged her. Your husband is very persistent. Tell him to let it go. Priya is already safe. Think carefully about what matters most. My jaw locked so hard the muscles at the back of my skull ached. Ruiz bagged the phone as evidence and told Doris, gently, that a message like that meant somebody was panicking, not in control, and panicking people leave tracks. Ruiz asked me to make 1 more call, on a line he controlled, to see if Arav would say anything that closed the last gap in the warrant. I said it needed doing. Doris squeezed my hand and let go. Arav picked up on the second ring, voice careful and flat, ready for it. I kept mine easy, the way I used to keep my hands loose on a hot wire. You don't grip too tight, you don't rush, or the whole thing arcs, and you're dealing with something far worse than what you started with. I think we got off on the wrong foot, I said. I'd like to hear your side. He gave me nothing solid, circled back twice to my lawyer, his voice cracking heat through the careful flatness when I mentioned the padlock. The breaker panel switched off on purpose, the boys under the bed 3 days with no real food. Then I said, 1 more thing. "Who's Marcus?" The silence that followed was a different animal entirely, not a man managing his words, but a man who'd just stepped onto ground he didn't know was there. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, pitch climbing a fraction. "You called me Marcus twice," I said. "I've known you 2 years. You know my name as well as your own. So I'm curious. Who's Marcus?" The line went dead. 17 minutes later, Ruiz's phone rang. Arav had used a credit card at a gas station 40 miles north. Units were already moving. He was taken into custody that night, at a motel off I-75. Nadia with him. He asked for his attorney and said nothing more. Nadia, Ruiz, told me the next morning over gas station coffee in the hospital waiting room, hadn't stopped talking for 3 hours straight, crying before the cuffs even closed. She told them Arav had approached her 8 months back at a bar in Columbus, that he'd built her a story about a marriage gone cold and a family that didn't understand him, that she'd been drowning in debt, and he'd look like an answer. She said she hadn't known the full plan until 2 days before it started, that once she heard Priya through the basement floor, she understood it wasn't going to stay clean. And then, the detail Ruiz warned me was hard to hear. 4 days into it, Arav had told her that if Priya kept refusing to sign, he'd move her to a storage unit outside Springfield and report her missing, and by the time anyone found anything, they'd be out of state with the money moved. Nadia quoted him directly. "Missing women don't fight custody battles." I sat with that in the waiting room and felt something in my chest go very still and very cold. He'd been going to kill her. $43,000 had moved out of Daniel and Priya's joint account over 14 months into a shell company Arav had registered in Delaware. A forged signature on a transfer form for the house, discovered by a document examiner within a day. A buyer already lined up, closing scheduled for the 15th. 14 months of quiet planning, behind a smile at every family dinner. 3 months is both nothing and everything. Long enough for a 7-year-old to stop flinching at raised voices in a grocery store. Long enough for a grown woman to start sleeping with the light off again. Long enough for 2 people my age to rearrange a house around the family they love most and discover it fits better this way than it ever did before. Priya and the boys stayed with Doris and me for 6 weeks while Daniel, who'd been on a business trip in Charlotte the whole time, blindsided and gutted when he finally got through to us, took leave to be with his family, and helped them find their footing again. Milo helped me rewire a light fixture in the garage on a Saturday afternoon, holding the wire strippers with the same fierce concentration his father used to have, and when he asked me, out of nowhere, if Uncle Arav had something broken inside him that nobody fixed in time, I told him no. A wire doesn't choose to fray, but a man chooses what he does with what's broken in him, and that's different. He turned that over for a long moment, the way only a kid can, then asked if he could finish the last connection himself. That's why I handed him the screwdriver. Daniel calls every Wednesday still, same as always, except now some weeks he calls from our own living room, 12 feet away instead of 40 minutes down the highway, and Doris and I sit there listening to the boys argue over whose turn it is to talk, and I think, this is what a house is supposed to sound like. If there's one thing I'd tell any father listening to this, it's the thing I didn't understand until I was 63 years old, kneeling on a concrete basement floor with my daughter-in-law shaking in my arms. I always believed love meant stepping back, giving your grown kids room, trusting them to handle their own lives. What I understand now is there's a difference between giving somebody space and leaving them alone in the dark. I saw the wrist. I heard the too quick, "I'm fine, Dad." And I told myself I was being an overprotective old man. Don't make my mistake. If something feels wrong about the person your family has let in close, ask the hard question. Make the uncomfortable call. Do it now, because later has a way of turning into too late. I believe I was in that driveway on that Tuesday morning for a reason bigger than luck, because a 7-year-old boy was keeping a promise his mother made him, and some promises are too important to break. If this reached something in you, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if these stories mean something to you, stay with me for the next one.